I'm Jessica Whitbread, and I'm an artist and activist. I do social practice, so performance and installation mostly, and I try to create pretty things and magical moments for people, especially people who are most marginalized. No Pants, No Problem focuses on people who are sexually marginalized, the LGBTQ community, as well as people living with HIV. But even beyond that, it's people who don't see themselves in magazines. We did a collective community bunting, capturing the different issues and the people who are trying to make that change happen in Charlotte. Many people associate it with a warmth and a hometown feel, but if you get closer and you read on the bunts, they're talking about pretty heavy, intense things that happen in our world that are true. There's a lot that we have experienced. We don't always have the space that we can talk about these things critically and try to make it so we feel that our experiences or our bodies are desired, appreciated, or accepted. Art is a vehicle for people to engage differently, because not everyone can engage with their voice.
I have always sewn since I was 4. I taught myself how to sew by hand. At 10, I got a sewing machine, and I really have been stitching since then. My work is based on patchwork designs and working with those designs to push them in different ways. It's really about this electric, mind-boggling color explosion, but all grounded within traditional patchwork. I'm a creative person, and I thought that words were the smartest way to share my creativity. But then I made my first quilt, and I battled with myself for a long time because all of my writing was really about advocating for positive social change, whether it be about the environment or women's issues or issues of class. I've got to figure out how to do the things I was doing with writing with my quilting. Then coming here, McColl Center connected those things. I am working with the residents of Moore Place to create a community quilt. The residents of Moore Place are chronically homeless, and almost all of them have either severe addiction or disability. By the time that I finished my time at Moore Place, I'd collected 31 quilt blocks. I think of my community quilts as visually stitching a community together. Their stories then become all connected to each other through thread. I want to try and make the world a better place, and maybe it's with a sewing machine.
I am a painter, and I am painting portraits of my dad. I didn't know who my father was until I was 17 years old. My mother had an affair, and I became the product of that affair. But because she was so mad at him for not rescuing her from a bad marriage, I basically didn't get to know him. As a painter, I'm real interested in what I call painting human souls. One of the reasons that I was attracted to making so many portraits of him is that I'm getting to know him. So he looks different when I take the photographs in each frame. Some of them are childlike, and some he look frail, and some is just overwhelmed with dignity. So it's nice to know that he's all those things. I put clocks in most of the paintings of him that have incorrect time. They don't make sense. And it's symbolic of this weird time. You know, if you look back at my work, it's always been women, and this is the first time that I've ever painted so many males.
I have an intensive studio-based practice. Everything I do has its basis in this investigation of communication. I'm working with the Charlotte Ballet. In addition to that, I'm making these paintings. Thinking about doing paintings and dance, I started thinking about the way individuals process information and the way individuals communicate rather than the mass. It tied in so nicely with a lot of my current historical concerns. Like, all my stuff now seems to have something to do with the Cold War. I've decided to make these images in the paintings not of events that have happened between people and been documented, but actually of things that people have made. This Russian cross that was made for Peter the Great. The print itself is flawed. By making the piece about that, I'm trying to call attention to the messy material nature of communication. When I started interrogating this idea of the individual, I thought, well, how do you know what's an individual in terms of its relation to communication of ideas? This narrative that started to make sense to me about doing this ballet is this classic Cold War ballad based on the Project MK Ultra. The CIA experimented with LSD and other psychoactive drugs on all kinds of people throughout the early 60s. There are only so many things that you can sort of say, this is happening in my mind, and not a symptom of the culture that I'm a part of. So it's based on this idea of the state trying to understand that by observing it. And since my work is all about fallibility of language, it's this kind of thing about the impossibility of that. All that the watchers are going to be able to see is this behavior. It's not the actual thing. Again, trying to call attention to the messy material nature of trying to communicate something.